The Blood Elves? They're shivering in the corners of Silvermoon, desperate for their next hit of magic. But the undead? We're addicted to vengeance. I got tired of waiting for my holy seals to tick down, so I went from playing the most pampered race on a safe space PvE server to an undead warrior crawling out of a grave straight into the absolute mayhem of open world PvP. A race that literally can't feel pain and a class that gets stronger the more it gets hit. Welcome to Spine Shatter. Alright, as cool as it was to only have to press 2 buttons on my paladin, my attention span is way too far gone for this to work in the long run. If leveling a paladin on a PvE server was like a peaceful Sunday morning bike ride with training wheels, how the fuck do you draw a bike from memory? Then leveling a warrior on a PvP server is like riding a unicycle through a burning minefield while invisible demon toddlers take turns throwing bricks at you, and for the first 30 levels, there's nothing you can do about it. You get stripped of your dignity, humiliated, and punished for simply existing. Now, some might diagnose me with severe commitment issues or masochistic tendencies. I like to call it having an elite, diversified portfolio. The spike in difficulty level was already noticeable when creating my character. Because of faction imbalance, the PvP server has specific windows in which the horde is unlocked and you can actually create a character. Even when it got unlocked and I was speedrunning the character creation process, I guess I somehow was still too slow. Now, as you can probably tell, there's no pristine city walls, just dirt, graves, and rot. Our journey starts in Tirisfal Glades. It's called that because some guy called Tirfelder. We are basically tasked with killing or being killed. It spans from the Scourge, humans, animals, you name it. Now, Spine Shatter is a PvP server. This means that at any moment being out and about questing, we can be attacked by Alliance players. All Alliance players. There is no level gap protection. If someone decides to go on a power trip and hunt down low levels on their level 70 rogue, there's nothing stopping them. Not long after stepping foot in Brill, I was already challenged by another fellow Forsaken. As one of the Forsaken, I must massacre any who pose a threat to the new order, human, undead, or otherwise. So I beat his ass. After a few more quests in the starting area, I headed straight to Undercity to get my professions. Mining and skinning. We are trying to maximize gold generation as soon as possible. No handouts in the form of magical horses, we're paying for this out of our own pocket. Also, why is charge one of the most satisfying abilities in the game? Well, that's because there is nothing quite like launching yourself at a target with the speed of a heat-seeking missile, completely ignoring the laws of gravity, physics, and basic self-preservation. Unfortunately, I didn't have any gold or items I could support my new warrior with on this server, but I did have prior experience, and I remembered that Ghostlands treated me pretty well. One of the first quests here rewards you with a bag, which is huge for a new character. Just like 7 levels in, I was already forced to juggle my items like an underpaid Amazon warehouse worker during peak season, except my conveyor belt was full of literal trash and I didn't even have a 6-slot bag to my name. Speaking of 6-slot bags, I also found this guy here that was selling those, and as desperate as I was, I bought 2 immediately with my hard-earned money that I got from selling ores and leather on the auction house. Except I was selling all this leather for like 5 silver instead of 5 gold because I'm a fucking idiot. As I continued my second run through Ghostlands, I started wondering why there was more spicy action going on between 2 NPCs than there was in the Gold Shire Inn between 2 fully grown adults wearing nothing but Anyway, at this point I was starting to have second thoughts about rerolling to warrior. This class really isn't for the weak. This quest right here took me at least 5 attempts because there's this little fun thing about warriors that as soon as you're fighting one guy and another even looks your way, you're as good as dead. After stocking up on some consumables and taking my sweet time, I finally get to the top of this cursed ship and grab those Night Elf plants. I also end up eating this one's corpse in order to assert dominance. Wait, poison the smoked meat rack? Are we the bad guy? Yes, we are. I'm not gonna lie, one of the main reasons I came to the Ghostlands was for the Cinderray Warblade, because it's just so good. But I quickly realized that that was off the table, so we're skipping it this time. Because of this, I was forced to do it the old-fashioned way and run some dungeons, where I actually got pleasantly surprised and rather lucky and got the Haunting Blade, which arguably is way more fitting for my new dead guy aesthetic. Getting this weapon was a massive upgrade, but let's be honest, we aren't here to look like a generic level 25 Andy. We are here for the holy grail of the mid-game. Now let me tell you about a weapon that turns the warrior from a walking piñata into a meat blender, the Whirlwind Axe. At level 30 there is a warrior exclusive quest called Whirlwind Weapon. It's a quest chain that in the end rewards you with one of the 3 whirlwind weapons. Now the sword is pretty cool if paired with the sword specialization talent, which gives you a chance to hit twice instead of once. For some reason we just don't talk about the mace. But also we're meta slaves over here, so we're going for the axe because it simply synergizes better with the warrior class overall. This is a two-handed weapon with a shit ton of damage, 3.6 speed, 15 strength and 14 stamina. We're literally going from hitting like a wet noodle to actually being able to dish out some respectable damage. But getting it at level 30 on a PvP server as a broke skeleton guy alone, that's a suicidal driven multi-stage heist. And we're gonna do it. Here's the plan. First of all, we need to secure enough gold for the materials because I value my sanity way too much to solo farm high level elementals on a fresh warrior. Then we need to enter the war zone that is Stranglethorn Vale to harvest troll tusks without getting deleted by level 70 rogues. Or rather, doing that despite being deleted by 70 rogues. And the last, most difficult part, solo a level 40 elite elemental boss using a highly questionable method I stole from a YouTube tutorial. The funding part genuinely went pretty smooth. After buying the life roots and the 3 different kinds of charms, I was ready to set off. First we have to travel to this island near Ratchet in order to participate in Fight Club and then beat this guy called Big Will. I was actually expecting this fight to be much harder, but I didn't even have to pop my spinny swords move. Smooth sailing so far. Then it was time for Booty Bay. Not even 5 minutes after leaving the safe zone, I wish I was kidding, my ears were blessed with a way too familiar sound. A sound that triggered immediate deep-seated hill-spread PTSD. Except this time the rogue got hit with the ultimate Uno reverse card. Just as I was preparing to accept the biggest act of disrespect this guy could offer, a random horde hunter was sent straight from the heavens to act as my guardian angel. I immediately started smashing every single button on my hotbar until the rogue went down. All me, baby. This part of the quest was really a true test of patience. Because I was only level 30, I kept accidentally pulling all the mobs within a 1 kilometer radius. Eventually I found a spot and things started kind of working out. At least this guy was nice enough to let me kill the troll first. Maybe they're not all so bad. You always gotta see things on the bright side though. It was quite refreshing to be killed by a furry instead of a greasy tourist trap pickpocket who locks me in a stun chain, goes to make a sandwich, then returns just to stun me again. Approximately 2 hours later it was time to cook that soup. Now I'll admit, I did not read enough to understand why we're summoning some ancient elemental by brewing a concoction of troll tusks, few rocks and some plants, but I digress. The important thing here is that as a level 30 warrior there is no way on earth we'd be able to solo a level 40 elite by simply walking up to it and smacking it with a sword. This quest is supposed to be done in a group, which kinda makes sense if you consider the fact that we're playing an MMORPG where the main focus is social interactions and teamwork, but my soul-crushing need for hyper-independence has already led me down this path and it's too late to turn back. The idea is to kite this guy utilizing this river, then throw objects at him until he eventually dies. I would be lying if I said that even this part went relatively smoothly with a few hiccups, but I think I spent at least 3 hours trying to make this work while simultaneously thinking this is all a conspiracy against warriors and the technique never even worked in the first place. You see, dying wasn't the issue. It was making sure to give this guy just enough attention to keep him interested, but not enough to actually touch me. I basically had to play the role of an OnlyFans creator, locking the prime content behind a paywall and leaving him perpetually desperate for more. At some point I even ran into some guy getting carried by his friend, inviting me along, but I proceeded to tell him that I must do this on my own. Let's also not forget that we're on a PvP server. But then, on attempt number 1267, something magical happened. A warrior of the Alliance was passing by. He didn't see a horde enemy though. He saw the universal suffering of the whirlwind quest. He recognized the pain and struggle we somehow shared despite being sworn enemies. He didn't go looking for our differences, but for what we had in common. And in that moment, it felt like the universe's puzzle pieces had finally aligned and fallen into place, restoring balance, if only for a fleeting second. I hesitated, but seeing my fellow brother in arms taking those massive hits for me, I had to step in. And so the Cyclonian finally went down, Feeling fulfilled and victorious, I happily ran back to claim my reward. But despite the universe rekindling a flame once lost, whatever was brewing inside of me was stronger. Way stronger. And it was time to let it out. Where were we? Right, we're now in the buttfuck nowhere, also known as Desolus. Once again, we're beefing with centaurs, but I think this time it's different centaurs. We switched up on our old friends real quick and now we're helping the rival gang. The goal now is to hit the big 4-0. Level 40 is when everything changes because we finally unlock Mortal Strike. It strikes a single target for weapon damage, something, whatever. But most importantly, it's not one of those annoying abilities that replaces our next auto attack. For a warrior, that is completely game changing. Apart from that, we finally graduate from mail and get to wear actual plate armor. But eventually, the leveling grind brought me here. A place that must have inspired the backrooms with how completely liminal and lonely it felt. This place legitimately forced me to face my deepest fears and ponder the consequences of my actions. At level 39, I headed to Arathi Highlands. Questing here was relatively frictionless, apart from when I reached a point where all I had left to do was 2 patrolling quests. Then just as I find our guy, this paladin decides to spectate. And just as I kill my, or turns out our target, she goes, "Too late!" And then we both get fucking obliterated by this mage. PvP server, haha! During this quest, believe it or not, I had to actually use my brain in order to get to yet another guy we needed to kill. I could have just realized as soon as I entered here that all I had to do was to get onto this little bridge in order to get to my destination. So turning right would have been the right move. Instead, I fought my way through this other structure to get all the way to the top in order to see it from another perspective, and then it clicked. With that out of the way, it was time to prepare for some dungeons I've actually never done before in Classic WoW, starting with Alderman. Alderman? Yeah, whatever. To unlock the dungeon quest, we have to head to Badlands, but to get there, we first have to trek through the Wetlands. They get really creative with their zone names, don't they? And then sneak through Loch Modan, which is strictly Alliance territory. Ooh. Shortly after my eyes were blessed with the bright red beauty of the Badlands, someone coughed on me. I decided to turn around and take a look at the heathen responsible, who immediately decided to give me even more diseases. At this point, I'd had enough. I quickly dealt with the situation. See, this is the exact moment I've been waiting for. People love to hype up the orc warrior meta, but nah. I'd rather have multiple fear resists. Checkmate, freak. As I was sitting there waiting for my digital vaccine to start working, this fella decided to sprint back from the graveyard and give it another try. Fortunately, he was instantly put down by a random horde homie who just happened to be passing by. Third time's the charm, no. Look, at this point I wasn't even trying to camp their corpse, I was literally just waiting for my HP to recover so I could skedaddle. Once the quests were all prepared and picked up, it was time for the dungeon run. Eventually, Bald Uncle and the gang showed up and it was showtime. Almost immediately, I got reminded of why I have a love-hate relationship with mages. On one hand, they're basically free walking vending machines just spitting out food and drinks, but on the other hand, they tag absolutely everything you even look at in the open world, and in dungeons they physically cannot stop themselves from blasting the mobs the exact nanosecond I pull them, which means they pull the aggro, panicking and then start running around like headless chickens while I have to chase them down, and chasing them down in here is a nightmare. When you enter Alderman, you're really committing to a brutal, unending maze. Every passing minute had me sweating that I would run out of storage space for the recording. No, but for real, I'm struggling over here. Please like and subscribe so I can afford to buy a new hard drive. After navigating this concrete labyrinth for what felt like an absolute eternity, I realized there was a grand total of 0 loot for me on the drop tables here. Perhaps the loot is the friends we made along the way. And to top it all off, most of the actual quest objectives weren't even inside the dungeon. I decide to waste no time and back to Desolus we go. Maraudon time. I did my research this time and the quest rewards actually include some plate options, so that's great. Even the last boss has some nice options for us. Then we spend 10 minutes looking for the entrance, not the first time I go through that experience. And then we don't even last 5 minutes, once again sounds familiar, and then we wipe. And then everybody leaves. And then I try to queue again and get indirectly told to get good because the mobs in the dungeon are too high level for me. So I figure I hit 44 and then try again. It was time to go back to the jungle. On my way there, however... To be fair, I always wondered what happens when you attack someone in a town. I go onto some ships, kill some pirates, then go on a journey to Feralis. I'm not even gonna comment on this. I wasn't even supposed to be here. Anyway, I get invited to another alderman, but there's no way in hell I'm going back there. Okay, now I'm level 44, but after some more research, it turns out that the Maraudon dungeon has some much higher level enemies towards the end of it, so I would probably not be able to run all of it anyway. This leaves me with only one option. So first I headed to Orgrimmar for some quest turn-ins, then we have to head back to Thousand Needles to pick up this Hydra quest, which I'm not completely sure we can do. After that we go to Dustwallow Marsh to pick up this one quest, followed by going back to Thousand Needles because that's where you go through to get to Tanaris. But I just missed that, so now I have to go back there, finally arrive in Dry Desert where we pick up all these quests, and now we're ready. Let's beat up some mummies or whatever. While waiting for the group to form, I met this guy, let's just call him X. Now, X seemed genuinely curious and excited about his World of Warcraft journey, which was sweet, but he also immediately started giving me major obsessed girlfriend vibes. However, he was nice enough, so we knocked out a few pre-dungeon quests together. The real issue was that I was running this dungeon early in the morning, and unfortunately not everyone in the world is equally unemployed, which meant the options for my group members were, let's just say, severely limited. We eventually scraped together a party consisting of 2 level 50s, myself, and our new best friend X, who was currently sitting at level 41. Because X was so low level, the game wouldn't even let us summon him to the meeting stone, so we had to start the dungeon slowly clearing the entrance while waiting for him to hike across the desert. The level 50s in the group immediately started complaining that we wouldn't get any optimal XP because of the massive level gaps, but at this point, I've been scammed by aldermen and locked out of Maraudon. I'm completely starved for plate gear, so I don't even care anymore. A few packs in, a decent item finally drops. X practically begins begging us on all fours in the party chat to let him have it. Look, in order to redeem myself for some of my past sins, I decided to be a good guy and just hit greed. He won the role, and his reaction could honestly only be compared to the sheer euphoric relief of finding out you do not in fact have terminal cancer after googling your symptoms on a random Wednesday afternoon. We eventually made our way to the base of the massive Zul'Farrak staircase. We fought our way to the top, took down the executioner and let the prisoners out of their cages. What followed can only be described as the equivalent of a Black Friday sale in America, just waves upon waves of angry trolls rushing the doors while we stood at the top of the steps fighting for our absolute lives. Then after everything we did for this dude, he decides to pull an Uno reverse on our asses, so we were forced to mop the desert floor with him as well. By the end of it all, I still hadn't actually received any direct loot drops. But, plot twist, our mage actually had the legendary mallet required to summon Gazrilla, which meant we got to tick yet another massive dungeon quest off of our list. So basically, I've ran the absolute concrete labyrinth of Alderman for a grand total of 0 loot. I tried running Maraudon, immediately wiped and practically got locked out. Bounced around the entire world map like a pinball, got obliterated by town guards and exiled myself to Feralis. Ended up here. And finally had a successful dungeon run with my level 41 bestie and 2 level 50s. And all of that for a carrot on a stick. I fucking love World of Warcraft.